pimp the dip, the ladies pimp, the women's fight for my delight because I'm the grand master with the 3 MCs that shocked your house for the young ladies. And when you come inside into the front and you do the freak spank and you do the bump, and when a sucker MC tries to prove a point, they trust this duo with this serious joint. And with that, we welcome you to Early Stoppage, a show where the news of the day is usually given just enough time, but sometimes not enough. I'm John Franklin. I'll be joined shortly, as always, by Craig Allen of Fight Night Picks and Between the Links. On this episode of Early Stoppage, we're going to change things up a little bit and start the show off with a burning question. Is MMA cooler than boxing right now? That's right. We started the show with Rapper's Delight, which was big in the 80s. We're talking about boxing, which was big in the 80s. Now we're going to peel back the layers of the sweet science. With Luke Thomas as our MMA Twitter intermediary, here's the scoop. Max Kellerman said on the Wilder Fury 2 broadcast, no matter who wins here, baddest man on the planet is whoever the UFC champion is, because that's a closer approximation of a real fight. But by all means, let's keep serving up Stephen A. Smith's vapid takes on UFC shows. So fight fans are all hot and bothered that boxing is in a renaissance and it's back. But if a boxing guy is saying that MMA has the real baddest man on the planet, Craig, then who's the real winner here?
John, you're wearing an Iron Mike Tyson shirt, you loser. I'm the cool guy. I'm wearing a Fight Night Pick shirt tonight, and everybody wants me to get into boxing all of a sudden, but MMA's the real winner here. I mean, Stipe Miocic in a real fight, if he fought Tyson Fury, if he fought Deontay Wilder, he's going to win. If he fought Joshua, if he fought any of these guys, he's going to win. He's the baddest man on the planet. The trips, the takedowns, the clinch work, the grappling, it makes MMA a much more dynamic sport. I'm going to throw another big name at you, and if you're listening to us, you know, in the States, maybe you're in Mexico, you're over in Europe, Europe, they might agree with me here. Austin Matthews, big MMA fan. That means a lot of things to a lot of people. That's a guy that's getting paid millions of dollars to play professional hockey in the biggest market in Canada, possibly in the world, in Toronto. And he said this week on the Spit and Chicklets podcast with Barstool that he's a really big MMA fan. He really follows the sport. He talked about, you know, it being a dream to sit cage side front row. He even referenced maybe if Khabib would hop over the cage and in front of him. Like, there's so many people that have become big MMA fans. We've even seen it as maybe not a joke, but with our pals Nick Baldwin and James Lynch over with The Score. They did a podcast. There was a little bit of a flub. Louis Capaldi, of all people, put it on his Instagram. So MMA is really gaining traction with a lot of celebrities and big-name people. And boxing is trying to capitalize on like a dirty aspect right now. They have Jake Paul fighting no-name YouTubers, and I'm covering it. So really, boxing's losing here. They only have 3 really big stars, especially at heavyweight, between the Joshua, the Wilder, and the Fury fights. Boxing's losing here. MMA's winning.
You know, boxing went through this time period where they had to decide, are we going to acknowledge MMA or not? Are we just going to let them do their thing? And James Toney was sort of the first real, like, acknowledgement of it. And it's Floyd Mayweather, like, you know, when Ronda used to call out Floyd or Conor started calling out Floyd, Floyd was just kind of dismissive of it. And then Conor started doing, you know, in the words of Dave Chappelle, he's putting up real numbers. When Conor started putting up those kind of numbers, you had to take him seriously. I think that I will say this. I do think had Deontay Wilder won the fight with an impressive knockout, we would have been more comfortable calling him the baddest man on the planet because of the way he carries himself. He looks like a tough guy. Tyson Fury is just a different dude. And I'm not saying Tyson Fury is not tough. You can't get up from Deontay Wilder knocking you on your ass in under 10 seconds without being a tough guy. But he doesn't carry himself that way. He's funner. He talks about mental health. Not that you can't be a tough guy and talk about mental health, but he's shown some vulnerabilities, is my point. And I think that from that perspective, Deontay Wilder was this image of toughness. And the MMA guys can still sort of pull that off. They can pull off the image of toughness. And I do think there's a point that, you know, they are the baddest boxers in the world, not the baddest fighters. They're the baddest. You know, as Joe Rogan said, boxing is kind of a curious thing. It's like you tell somebody, I want to get in a fight with you, but we're going to set this rule. We can only use our hands. Really doesn't make any sense in its creation in terms of fighting. So, yeah, I think MMA guys will always be the baddest guys on the planet.
All right, John. So by that approximation, if you're listening out there and you've been a fan of MMA for the past 10, 15 years, dust off those tap out cage print shirts. You're cool again. You're cooler than the boxing guys. So John, if we continue on, let's take a step back into MMA. I know Wilder Fury was all the rage. And listen, we talked about it last week, but this week, again, Brendan Schaub scoffed at Brian Callen for trying to bring up the Paul Felder, Dan Hooker fight on The Fighter and the Kid. But we're an MMA podcast, and we'll gladly talk about it. So, John, Paul Felder, after the fight, alluded to a possible retirement following the slugfest. Do you take him at his word here?
You know, friend of the show, Brendan Schaub, really should pay more attention to MMA. It's where he has his origins, and he should probably do his homework a little bit. Side note, I've been very critical of Luke Thomas for this reason. He seems to call out everybody except for the guy he's working for, who makes the least sense in the space. So it just shows you that everybody has their conflicts of interest. Back to the Paul Felder of it all. I like to take this guy at his word. I think mostly he is one of those commentators who deals in authenticity, right? That's his currency. So I think for the most part, he is to be held at his word. The question becomes, Craig, can he live in existence like George St. Pierre does, where he stays training and just never fights? Because I think that's what he wants to do. He's talking about having his 4-year-old. He wants to still be a part of MMA, still be, keep his commentating job and still understand the nuances, still be in the gym, but just not have to go, off, like not have to make 170 or 155, be happy to just walk around at whatever he walks around, live the life of guys like Bisping who are like, listen, I think a lot of these guys, to be honest with you, they go one of two ways. They either go I'm just fat and I'm done, or they're like, I've built a life where I'm a badass. I've talked a lot of shit in my day. I got to stay at least good enough shape for anybody that's coming at me when I'm out in public now. So I think that's kind of the approach Bisping's taking, and I think Felder probably will take the same approach.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I mean, this is a guy that on television drank a mixture of milk, vodka, and crow egg, which was later added and produced with human growth hormone on Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I'm talking about Fight Milk. I'm a big Paul Felder guy. I think he's really set himself up well on the commentary desk. I think the fact that they sold this fight in conjunction with what happened a couple of years ago when Paul Felder interviewed Dan Hooker, they said they wanted to fight each other. He's got that kind of fire that you can bring into a cage. He's great with his interview skills, and he's really set himself up well. So if he wants to retire, not on top, but, I mean, he's a ranked lightweight, and he's had some real wars. I mean, he's come a long way since he was fighting Alessandro Ricci in UFC Halifax with Craig Allen in attendance. So this is a guy that's really pushed his career in the last couple of years. And if he's the type, like you said, that he stays fight ready, stays in the gym, maybe even hops on a podcast, this is a guy that is really setting himself up quite well.
I have a question for you. Don't look anything up. Just answer off the top of your head.
All right.
In his last 5 fights, how do you think Dan Hardy did?
Probably not that great.
Okay, let's say not that great. Just give me your prediction as to what or your guess as to what his record was in his last 5 fights.
Well, I'm going to this is where the YouTube commenters come in. Oh, Craig, you're casual. All right, so I was out of MMA, like from following it at a hardcore level for 4 or 5 years. That's when Dan Hardy was starting to tail off.
Listen, I don't know the answer. Just give me your down. Forget the guy.
2-3. 2-3 in his last 5.
He was 2-4 in his last 6. So he was 2-3 in his last 5. So, but here's my point. Every time his last two came in 2012, he beat Duane Ludwig and then he beat Amir Sadallah. This is what I need to tell you.
Yeah, Amir Sadallah.
This is what I need to tell you. Whenever people talk about a Dan Hardy comeback, there's a lot of interest in it. It doesn't matter how he ended his career. I think that while I think Paul Felder will step away, he can monetize his retirement and flirt with coming back and maybe, Craig, hang on, maybe get bigger fights coming back than he would have gotten had he stayed.
Yeah, there's one kind of wrench that you could throw into that plan. That's the fact that Dan Hardy, A, had cool hair, B, fought for a title, and C, when he fought for that title, he was a huge bad guy, and people loved to hate him. And then all of a sudden now he's a good guy. So he's got that going for him. And now he has this gray faux hawk. Is it a mohawk? Is it a faux hawk? Because there's still hair on the side. Yeah, people want to see that. I don't know. People still want to see Carlos Condit, so what do I know? I
wouldn't mind seeing Dan Hardy fight Paul Felder. All right, up next, Flip side of this coin, we call fight. Dan Hooker came out on top at home. He's currently your 5th-ranked lightweight contender, but he's number 1 in your heart. Riding a 7-1 streak since 2017. Who's next for Eugene Berriman's 3rd brightest star?
You like that? I wrote that. I thought that was kind of funny.
It is.
Who's next for Dan Hooker? All right, so I talked about this with Keith Schillen yesterday on the MMA Takeover, and it was kind of with regards to Justin Gaethje, but I think Gaethje's probably the play. If Gaethje doesn't get Conor McGregor, that's the guy. It's got to be Dan Hooker. And if Conor wants Khabib, then he gets it. If he wants Masvidal, if he wants Usman, he probably gets all those fights. But really, the talk's been Gaethje. I think Dan Hooker, Justin Gaethje is a way better fight. That's the one that I want to see.
I want to see that fight too. The whole Conor of it all makes it interesting. I think Conor wants to fight more. There's been rumors about him and Gaethje. I'd love to see that. I mean, listen, anytime you dangle Conor, it doesn't matter who the guy is. He's in a weird spot. He's we've seen a lot of dangling Conor in videos on the internet.
That's
what's got him in trouble, all that dangling Conor. So it's Gaethje, it's McGregor, it's Poirier, and it's Ferguson above him, and that's it. So realistically, I don't see Conor McGregor taking a fight with Dan Hooker, so it's Gaethje or Poirier. I mean, if he wants to go anywhere, I think Kevin Lee would be an interesting fight. I think there's some other fights to make. But,
I don't know why. Yeah, sorry I cut you off. Poirier was my guy. I went with Gaethje, and then when you said his name, I don't know. How did I miss Poirier? That's a good fight.
I'd like to see Dan Hooker and Poirier stylistically. Yeah, so that's who I'll go with. I'll go with Poirier. But listen, all those guys up near Khabib and Tony, they got decisions to make. You know, they got to decide, do I wait this Tony Khabib thing out? Do I take a fight with another killer in the interim? So I think Dan Hooker might be sitting and staring for a while.
So let's roll this into our next topic. And your current lightweight champ, Khabib Nurmagomedov, was somehow on TMZ. Really weird. He was offering up some insight into a potential rematch with Conor McGregor and said, among other things, that if they were to rematch, and I quote from TMZ and Khabib Nurmagomedov, "This is not real lightweight championship fight, but we talk about drama and money. And of course, and there's no and, of course, this is good, but I come here to make my legacy." And that is, of course, Khabib Nurmagomedov. So if a rematch is to happen, does it generate more than just money and drama? Like, is it – because it doesn't move the division forward. So is there anything else that this brings to the table?
No, it's about money and drama, but I do think it's a little bit about legacy. Khabib is very good at doing one thing, and that is withholding his services as a negotiation tactic.
He's good at two things. He's also good at listening to Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov.
That's true. So listen, I think that all of this is just about raising the price. All of this is just about bothering Conor and acting like, Conor. If I'm Conor, I completely flip it on him. And I say, listen, if I was him, I wouldn't want to fight me again either. He had a good night. I had a bad night. He can just dine in on that or dine out on that for the rest of his life. So if I'm Conor, I would definitely flip it on Khabib and make it seem like he doesn't want to fight him. That's the way to get the fight.
You're trying to reverse bully a bully? Like, what?
No, you're trying to
fight me again. You don't want to beat the hell out of me again. You don't want that. Take somebody else. You want a fresh challenge. Don't beat me up. Reverse psychology on Khabib Nurmagomedov. I don't think that's going to work. I like that, though.
Well, nothing's going to work. So you might as well try. Conor has to regain the upper hand in terms of annoyance here. Khabib won the fight. He has the belt. He's the one that controls everything. The only thing, which is kind of what I'm with you on the reverse psychology thing, but Justin Gaethje almost reverse psychologied his ass into a fight with Conor just by saying he didn't care about it. He would insult him and go, you know what? This guy's never going to fight me. I'm not the guy that he wants to fight. Now, granted, I think Khabib is less likely to fall for that. And I'm not saying Conor's falling for it. He's probably like, listen, this guy's highly ranked. It'll be a good fight. He likes to get hit. I like to hit people. He's a good matchup. So I think that, I don't know. I think this fight's going to happen if Khabib wants it to happen.
You're telling me that the guy who engaged in, and hardly engaged in mental warfare, but the guy who had a dolly cart thrown at him, who, slurs, this and that, like I'm very confused. I'm very confused by all this, John Franklin. I think in terms of money and drama, that's what it is. And I think Khabib is actually selling a fight. It's crazy. I think he's doing a good job here. If you're going to go on TMZ, spout stuff out like that. It's a really complex situation. I know ESPN put a picture out there. It was Ariel Helwani, Brett Okamoto, and Jeff Wagenheim, if I'm not mistaken. And they had ranked in one column who's the most likely next opponent for Conor McGregor, and then who's like the dream matchup. And for some reason, Jeff Wagenheim, because he's a hipster and wears Hawaiian shirts, said, not these guys. But it was Masvidal and Khabib were the two names that were thrown up there. For me, I'd sooner see a Masvidal fight for McGregor. Could I see a Khabib rematch? Yeah, I mean, it's the UFC. Rankings don't matter. It's like, whose line is it anyway? But I think that if Khabib's going to sell this fight and then you get Conor involved, it's bigger than a Gaethje fight. So booking it, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Well, real quick, just to crystallize the question, because I think I'm the one that got us off on a tangent. Do you think that Khabib needs a rematch for his legacy, or?
No, he beat the piss out of the biggest star in the sport. He doesn't need it.
Hot quote here, Craig. 6-3 UFC featherweight Zara Infinite Farron lost her promotional debut by first-round sub to Megan? What is it these days?
Megan.
She spoke with Megan Anderson. She spoke with Mike Bond of MMA Junkie today, and among other things, said that I will be ready to take on Amanda Nunes. Farron said, obviously, there's going to be some adjustments to make and some serious training to put in, but I feel like I signed with the UFC with that goal in mind, and obviously I will definitely be ready. Is this the be-all, end-all at women's 145 pounds?
John, I wrote this question, and I anticipated that this is how you would read it. You'd start out like, why are we talking about Zara Farron in the UFC? At UFC Norfolk, actually, that's not even your co-main event, and she's talking about fighting for a title. That is your co-main event, rather. She's fighting Felicia Spencer. She lost to Megan Anderson. Now she's taking a step up against Felicia Spencer. So it's opposite day. 2 wins get you a title shot. A loss to Megan Anderson gets you Felicia Spencer. And then you can fight for a title. Is this the be-all, end-all at 145? Unfortunately, it is. They don't seem to want to build a division. And now you have somebody that's 6-3 coming off a loss to somebody who really hasn't proved it at 145 pounds. Megan Anderson was supposed to be that next big thing, the big wave of new women's featherweights. It was going to beat Chris Cyborg, and it just hasn't happened yet. And now we'll never know because Cyborg's over in Bellator. Could it happen if she beats Felicia Spencer? It's a shame to say it, but at 7-3, Zara Farron would probably be the next likely contender at 145 pounds.
Listen, I mean, where was Israel Adesanya 3-4 years ago in terms of the national spotlight or the international spotlight? So when I say what I'm about to say, please take that with a grain of salt. That there's always somebody coming. There's some guy right now who could be the next Conor McGregor, the next Israel Adesanya, or some gal. I mean, my question for you, though, is when you look at the landscape of women's MMA in terms of featherweight, do you think the only answer is somehow getting Kayla Harrison to the UFC and having her make 145 pounds? I mean, is she it?
The trouble here is the fact that you had an entire season of The Ultimate Fighter. Your last season, you had one at heavyweight, one at women's featherweight, and everybody left. Really. I mean, who stuck around? They went back to 35. They didn't stick around. So that was kind of your be-all, end-all, and it didn't happen here. Je pense que c'est une bonne idée avoir quelqu'un qui est dans la division de 145 qui vient de le pays de France. But apart from having somebody from France and the fact that France just legalized MMA, that's your only play here. That's your only play. Maybe you have Amanda Nunes headline a pay-per-view, your first one in Paris, and you have her fight Zara Farron. And then you have Cyril Gane in the co-main event, and then you bring back the fire kid Tom Duquesnoy. But other than that, I don't really see a big plan for somebody like Zara Farron, especially, again, first of all, she has to beat Felicia Spencer. Okay, Zara Farron's a good striker. Felicia Spencer's good everywhere. She has incredible takedowns, and she's a great grappler. And she fought 5 rounds against Chris Cyborg. Yeah, it was somewhat lopsided. But I just don't, it's a shame that we even have to say, do we bring in a superstar to make this division good? Is that what we have to do? Because every other division that we have in the UFC right now, even if it's take women's flyweight right now, and you could say, Macy Barber was fast-tracked to a title shot. So-and-so's fast-tracked. But at least there's a division, there's rankings, there's people that aren't ranked that are trying to build their way up. But at women's featherweight in the UFC, it's kind of like, well, we'll pick up. Here's a great example. Megan Anderson beat Zara Farron. Who does she get next? 4-0 Norma Dumont, who hasn't fought in 2 years, making her UFC debut. That's what they're doing right now. It seems like there's no direction at all. I'm very fired up about this one.
I can tell. So I'm going to jump you for 1 second because before we move on to our next segment, I like the rundown to be nice and clean with 6 topics. So I'm going to throw one in here. It's a hipster's delight. I want to talk about Submission Underground. If you watched it or did not watch it, doesn't matter, because I'm going to talk to you from the perspective I watched it, and I'm going to ask you questions about it. Having watched it, because I want to know your thoughts on it in general. Okay, so a couple things. In the main event, it was a tag team jiu-jitsu match between Vinny Magalhães and what's the kid's name? His last name's Bain.
You watched this?
No, I did. Hold on. I think it's Nick Bain. I'll check it. Against Nicky Rod and Craig Jones. So it's tag team. The gist of it is they're both in the cage. One guy's holding onto a rope. They go for however long they go. Now, what we found out this night, which is interesting, is that you can, as a competitor, not compete. Because Craig Jones participated in this for 0 minutes. Basically what happened was Nicky Rod was there in regulation, and then in the overtime, you got to choose who you wanted to go into the overtime. They stuck with Nicky Rod. One of the thoughts there being that he had been competing and he was sweaty, and part of the overtime is escaping and who escapes faster and who holds the guy longer. So depending on how you look at it. So anyway, the gist of it is Craig Jones is the face of the organization and never competed. What are your thoughts on that?
All right. So definitely didn't watch it this weekend, but I can compare it to other sports, and this is where the listenership dives. Let's compare this to the Pro Bowl in the NFL, the All-Star game in the NBA, the All-Star game in the NHL. It's not really the same with the NBA, but it is with the NHL. All of your biggest players don't want to play. You know why? Because they don't want to get hurt. So does it water down your brand? Does it hurt it? Yeah, it does. Your Submission Underground, and I know why John brought this up. Who runs Submission Underground, John? Yeah, it's so conceited. It's Chael Sonnen, so that's why we have to talk about it. It hurts it. It does hurt it, though, because if you don't have your Gordon Ryans and you don't have your Craig Jones competing, then who's really going to tune in? I mean, that's a stupid question. We know who's going to tune in. It's going to be your Kyle Volkmans. It's going to be your Michael Fidels. You're going to see them on Twitter talking about this. It's going to be Shay My Name on Twitter. But apart from that, it's really hard to try and bring people in to watch grappling matches and grappling tournaments. And if you want to gain new fans, you have to have your quote-unquote stars. So, yeah, it's kind of a shame that Craig Jones didn't compete. But
well, for me, it's kind of a shame that he was able to not compete. Like there was a loophole in the thing that allowed him not to compete.
John, rules were meant to be broken.
They were, and I think for me the part where this gets real funky is, listen, if Chael really wanted the guy to compete, he would have booked him in a singles. And who's going to take that fight? I'm not sure. I would imagine everybody on the other side of the, sometimes you try and get all these guys in there together, and that's the way. It's like real wrestling, or like pro wrestling, I mean, in the sense that you book a tag team match and the two most important figures are not in there at the beginning of the match. That's been done for years, right? So Vinny started for his team, and Nicky Rod started for, obviously he was the only one that competed. Let's talk about Submission Underground a little bit further. Ali Aquinta and Mike Perry competed. There was a little bit of juice between the guys, a little bit of shit talking beforehand. Perry ended up winning. And then Aquinta at the end of the fight said, I want to go kill myself. I've lost to Mike Perry. Do you think that Chael, what he's done in the past is he's used Submission Underground as a means for fighters who were suspended to compete? Do you think that Chael can use this as sort of a Trojan horse to get his brand bigger by allowing guys to compete who either have not yet competed in the UFC or in a different way? I mean, they're still facing off. They're still contacting each other. My question is, how much potential do you think this has in terms of marketing?
Yeah, when you ask me that question, the banjo from Deliverance starts to play, and I think of BKFC, because there are people on Friday and Saturday nights in Mississippi that head out in their 1995 Ford F-150, 6 or 7 people on the back in hay bales drinking, Busch Light. And they're getting excited for Leonard Garcia to fight in bare knuckle boxing. So if Chael Sonnen can try to spin these a certain way and try and market it a certain way, you're going to grow that audience. I think having Mike Perry associated with your brand, while it can be damaging, and I talk about it, it seems like every third week I talk about Mike Perry's video from Jackson Wink where he wore the headdress and had the smoke. I'm still upset about that. I think that's really stupid. But if you can bring these UFC guys in and these bigger names, even the Vinny Magalhães of the world, yeah, his success in MMA hasn't been that great. Of course, he lost to Sean O'Connell in the finals of the first season of PFL, and I'll hold that over him forever. But if you can bring in these big names, it's always great. And all you have to do is borrow from that DKFC model of bringing in bigger and bigger names, and all of a sudden you're blowing your load over Paulie Malignaggi and Artem Lobov.
Yeah, I'm with you. Side note, do you think Leonard Garcia will be bigger in BKFC if he went by Leonard Skinner Garcia? Like if he just steered into it?
And he just walked out and they played the entire what song would he have? Would he have Simple Man? Or would it be Freebird?
I think Freebird. He'd go with Freebird.
All of Freebird. And then they play the Forrest Gump clip. I mean, just really sell it to the people down there.
We need like a buzzer, Craig. It's coming up. New segment alert. New segment alert. Hit me.
Whoop, whoop. All right. So new segment alert. We're going to go ahead and actually look at UFC Norfolk. And the last time UFC was in Norfolk, Dustin Poirier was in the main event. It's pretty cool stuff there. But it's a bit of a weaker card this time. We only have 2 ranked fighters, and they're both fighting in the main event. So that kind of sucks. But there's plenty of prospects to look forward to, and a lot of people making their debuts. So we have 4 fighters competing this week. And to cross over to basketball, and again, we keep talking about different sports, we'll see if this fighter that we're going to talk about, we'll go through the 4, should they shoot their shot and call out somebody in the process with a win, or should they dribble up? This segment's called Shoot Your Shot or Dribble Up. My first fighter is, and it's a small division, and I already ragged on it, Megan Anderson. Does she shoot her shot with a win, or does she dribble up and take whoever?
I think she shoots her shot. And let me just say out front, and I don't want to ruin this segment, but I'm just going to say out front, I'm a fan of shooting your shot. Like, that's my preference. I think that's what, the end of the fight, the reason why they put a microphone in front of you, the fight's over. Everybody watched it. They don't really want to know how the fight went. They want to know what's next. That's our good friend Chael, friend of the show, Chael Sonnen, said, you start booking the next fight at the end of the last fight. So, I definitely think she should call somebody out. In terms of who, I don't know. She's in a thin division.
You call Amanda Nunes out.
She called Amanda Nunes out. She called Felicia Spencer out. If I were her, I would definitely shoot my shot.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's not – for all 4 of these fighters, I'm not going to say shoot your shot. But for this one in particular, I would say shoot your shot. Rematch with Felicia Spencer if she's able to beat Zara Farron. And then, call out the champ in Amanda Nunes. So the second fighter. Interesting one. Just changed camps from AKA to ATT and lost his last fight to Matt Frivola. Luis Pena. If he wins, and he's a really popular guy on social media and in general, does he shoot a shot or does he just take who they give him and dribble up?
I think he should dribble up. I'm going to say this. So I used to hang out with this kid back in the day. He was younger than me.
What was his name? Slick Pete? Is that what they called him back in your day?
No, it was not my day. He has an interesting nickname, which is a story for another day, but we'll talk about that.
Pigpen?
No. I like that though, because Pigpen was on Peanuts and so was Franklin. So I think that Luis Pena does a pretty good job of marketing himself. I think that he has the support of the UFC. I don't think he has to call somebody. Oh, the point of the guy that I used to know was he was a good looking kid. We go out to clubs and he'd start acting crazy and trying to just do all this crazy shit. And I said to him, I was like, hey man, less is more. You're a good looking kid. Just let the process work itself out. Go to a club, learn how to dance, say hi to a girl, you'll be okay. And he was just trying all this craziness, man. Trying to get up on tables and shit. I was like, chill out.
I've got a story. This sounds like me.
I was like, chill out, man. Less is more. So anyway, for Luis Pena, I think he's doing a good job of what he's doing so far. I don't think he needs to crowbar himself or anyone else into a clunky call out. I don't know if that's his brand.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, he struggled against wrestlers, so don't call out a wrestler. I mean, he's 2-2 in the UFC. He's going to win over Matt Wyman, which doesn't mean a whole lot, and Stephen Ocho Peterson. Other than that, the split to Matt Frivola and a bad loss to Mike Trizano in his debut. And if we can go back, I wish I had advice like that when I was in those days, because I was trying to finagle 40-year-olds at the club, and I had a buddy with me one time that was dancing in flip-flops, and she had him kicked out because he didn't match proper dress code. So wish we had advice like that back in my day. And I think as far as Luis Pena is concerned, just dribble up. Just take it easy. Again, you just switched camps. You moved all the way across the country, and you're taking a fight in good old Norfolk, Virginia. Our next fighter, It's a guy that's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Losses include Fabrizio Verdum, Derek Lewis. It's Marcin Tybura. He's fighting Sergey Spivak. They're both unranked at this point. Marcin Tybura's fought in a main event before. Does he shoot a shot or does he dribble up?
So
time out. They probably don't interview him.
Fair enough. There is a theory that you push all your chips into the middle of the table only when you have a great hand, like a great hand. That's what some people wait for. If Marcin Tybura has really something up his sleeve, like he comes in with something loaded up and he knows it's a home run, then yeah. But I can't even close my eyes and imagine that guy calling somebody out. Like, it's so disconnected from who I believe him to be or public perception of him is that I think that I can't imagine him doing it well. So I would say just dribble up, let the UFC. Also, not for nothing, when you're 1-4 in your last 5, let's not try and bring too much attention to ourselves. Let's not have the UFC checking the resume going, what, 1 and what? 2 and what now? I would just, quietly step out of the octagon, collect your paycheck, and go home.
And it wasn't fair what I said. Realistically, they probably won't interview him in the cage. It's a somewhat early prelim in Norfolk, Virginia. I don't know how many Polish speakers there are there, but maybe when they bring him to the back, if there's a media interview, and this is all barring a win, then maybe he'll call somebody out, but I don't think he will. Again, 1-4 in his last 5. You got to get a win. He's lost his last 2. And then we end with our main event and our title fight. I did a 5-minute main card or main event prediction for this one with Fight Night Picks, and I picked Mr. Joey Benavidez, whose wife Megan O'Leary will not be reporting. She will be sitting cage side for this fight. I think Benavidez is going to beat Davison Figueiredo. Does he shoot a shot and call somebody out, or does he dribble up and take whoever the UFC makes a challenger next?
Craig, who's the best 125-pound fighter in the UFC, in your opinion?
In the UFC?
In the UFC.
Oh, it's Brandon Moreno.
If I'm Joseph Benavidez and I win this fight, I call out Brandon Moreno. And I call out Brandon Moreno for a couple of reasons. I want everybody in that division to be aware that I know what's going on and I'm the king of this shit. And I think that it's kind of like if you're at a party and someone's checking out your girl and you walk up to them and you go, I know you're checking out my girl, but she came with me, she'll leave with me. I think that's Benavidez letting the whole division know that I just got this belt, but I know all you guys got your eyes on me. I got my eye on you too.
Trap card. Yeah, I'd like Matt Schnell. Give me Matt Schnell next. But really, the easy thing to say is shoot shot, call out Henry Cejudo, bring him back down to 125.
Yeah.
Or call out TJ Dillashaw. Let's see how that clean juice is working out for him. Yeah, I think if you call out Askar Askarov or Brandon Moreno, put the division on notice. Exactly. You know what's going on. Don't take the Demetrius Johnson route of whoever, and you want to keep collecting the belts. For Joseph Benavidez, you're not in the twilight of your career, but you're on the wrong side of 35 at a lower weight class, which doesn't typically correlate all that well. So call out one of those guys. And to the point of Brandon Moreno, both guys do the same thing quite well. That would be a bitchin' fight.
Also, not for nothing, Henry Cejudo, if we're saying he's the guy that saved this division, then listen, you know how you thank him? Say, I appreciate it, Henry. You go be a bantamweight, and I'm going to book fights with these 125-pounders and make sure that your work wasn't in vain. I mean, if you're going to take that time up for something, don't do it. Don't use it to call out part-timers that you might not even be able to get into the cage. Call out your own division, build your division, call out Moreno, Askarov, and Cara France. Call them all out. Say, listen, whichever one of you guys, say you 3 figure it out, and when you figure it out, come after the king.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect, memorialization of that. If you just burned an effigy of Henry Cejudo, really thanked him so much, and then played My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion, I think that would be a perfect way to just cap off a Cejudo run from 25 to 35. And now it's the Joseph Benavidez era. Ew.
You're so all over the map. I love it.
I know.
All right, Craig. Let's lace them up. Let's lace up these gloves. Let's put the headgear on. Let's get into sparring sessions. MMA fans have mixed feelings about Diego Sanchez's spiritual and combat sports guru. I like how spiritual came first. Josh Fabia. But after this weekend, the tables have turned. Deontay Wilder lost to Tyson Fury. Spoiler alert, but he lost because his walkout suit bogged him down. Never mind that he trains in a 40-pound weighted vest. Now he's reportedly going to fire his corner, Mark Breland, because the towel was thrown in. And according to Wilder, you're never supposed to throw in the towel. Here's the long and short of it. What is the role of a good coach? What is the role of a good cornerman during a fight? Is it to protect the fighters, to be concerned with his safety, or just to go for the win at all costs?
Depends on the point you're at in your career, I think, personally. I mean, I've seen it where you have a young fighter in there, all full of piss and vinegar. They're getting the crap beat out of them, but they're in there for the experience. They're in there for a title. They're in there for whatever reason. You keep them in. But we've seen fights recently. Like, remember when Raquel Pennington fought Amanda Nunes and she got totally outclassed and they just kept sending her back out there to take a beating? Throw in the towel. We don't see it enough in MMA. In terms of boxing, I've seen it somewhat recently. Like, Alexander Usyk's last opponent came in on like 2 weeks' notice and looked like, I don't know. He reminded me of my favorite former UFC heavyweight, Anthony Freight Train Hernandez. It was just some guy that they found that could fight. And the corner threw in the towel. And it wasn't a beatdown. He was losing, but they just threw in the towel. Like, there's no sense of taking any extra punishment. You're fighting one of the best fighters in the world. I wish it was more commonplace that we saw corners looking after the overall health of their fighter. The con to that, and the other side is, you have a short window to be a fighter. You have a short window to make a set amount of money. Do you capitalize on it and just keep fighting? And then you're that tough guy or tough gal. But I really think it's fighter safety above all. Should be anyway.
You know, we talked earlier about the fact I'm a teacher, and I had to clean up something for my kids the other day and tell them a saying. And I told them excuses are like belly buttons. Everybody's got them, and they don't mean anything. Or they don't do anything. You know, so Deontay Wilder has 1,000 reasons why he lost this fight. Now he wants to blame Mark Breland. He's got the suit. The guy's got a rematch clause anyway. What does he care? You know, the Josh Fabia's this guru. The thing that stood out to me, and I know Diego spoke for himself, but the thing that stood out for me was when they interviewed Fabia, anytime I see someone speaking on someone else's behalf and the person's just sitting there quietly, it never sits well with me. I mean, this is a whole nother conversation, but like, even when like the old school Mike Tyson, Robin Givens interview where she's like talking about Mike, he's just sitting there like nothing. And it's like just weird. For me, I'm all over the place with this answer, but I'm going to take it another way.
That's fair.
Gene Simmons once was interviewed, and he was talking about marriages. And this is how I'm going to get back to Deontay Wilder and Mark Breland. Gene Simmons says the purpose of a prenup is that you're supposed to settle things when times are good. Because when times are bad, you don't want to give anybody anything. So you say, I love her very much. She deserves the house, right? And then that way, when things go bad, it's already decided. Deontay Wilder and Mark Breland should have had this conversation when times were good. Before the fight, they should sit down and say, what, Deontay, are the circumstances under which you want me to throw in this towel? Now, I understand that you can't trust fighters and they're always going to do that, but that's in the heat of the battle. I'm talking about 3 weeks prior, a month prior to this, and I would record it. And I would say, here's what I'm going to do, Deontay. I would like to have a conversation with you about when you're comfortable with me throwing in the towel. And if I end up throwing in this towel, I will be releasing this footage. So make sure you think very carefully about what you're about to say. And
yeah, like,
go ahead.
Sorry. Like the conversation that's been had after the fight was like, all throughout training camp, you don't throw in the towel. You don't throw in the towel. Deontay Wilder said, you don't throw in the towel. But if you've more or less, you look like you lost your equilibrium. You're trying to hold yourself up on the ropes. You're bleeding out of your ear and you're getting beat up. If it was me, I would throw in the towel regardless. Like, this guy has a life to live. And I listened to it today. It was on Levels, MMA and Combat Sports by Gorilla Cross on YouTube. Check them out. I know they're not on the Loud MMA Podcast Network, but I do really like what they have to offer. And it's less about the cornerman who threw in the towel, and it's more about the coaching that he's getting. Because this guy's not a technical boxer. Go watch his fight against, this is a classic Canadian, Quebecois Haitian, Bermain Stavern. Go watch the second fight when he Ragnaroked him with Thor's mighty hammer. You look at the technicality of Deontay Wilder in that fight, and it's non-existent. It's showboating, it's looping hooks, it's looping shots, whatever. He has to clean up his technique first, especially when you're taking on one of the most technical boxers in Tyson Fury that's so well trained. But in terms of throwing in the towel, yeah, you got to protect your guy.
So I already got Chael into the conversation. Let me get Teddy Atlas in. Teddy Atlas, two of my favorite trainers of all time, Teddy Atlas and Buddy McGirt. Buddy McGirt was Arturo Gotti's trainer. And one time Arturo was getting the just bejesus beaten out of him. And Buddy McGirt was in the corner and he said, show me something or I'm calling this thing. Show me something in this next round or I'm calling this thing. That's how you take control of the situation, right? Teddy Atlas is even worse. Teddy Atlas questions guys' manhood. Buddy McGirt just wants him to show some fight. Teddy Atlas goes, you want me to go out there? Do you want to stay here and I'll go out there? And that's how Teddy Atlas rolls. That's a different story. But either way, both of these guys said, listen, I don't care what we've said through training camp. I need to see something in this round. I need to know that you are in this fight or I'm shutting it down. And that way the fighter can fight with urgency. And then at least there's a recognition of the fact that you made that ultimatum in the corner for the world to see. So I think that's probably the way to handle it. But, Breland did what he did. I do think, and we talked about this as maybe a secondary topic of the sparring sessions. Initially, I said, well, wow, now towels are never going to get thrown in. They don't get thrown in that much anyway. So, I thought that this would set us back how many ever years in throwing in towels. The fact is they don't come in a lot anyway. So I think that it sucks that Breland lost his job, but I don't think that corners who would have normally thrown it in maybe twice less a year a towel will get thrown in because somebody's afraid to lose their job. I do think it sets a bad precedent, but I don't think it'll have like huge ripple effect in boxing.
I just want to throw a name out there because I said that the guy that Usyk fought wasn't that great. His name is Chaz, C-H-A-Z-Z Witherspoon. Philadelphia's own Chaz Witherspoon.
Enough said. You said everything needs to be said. All right, I'm up. And for the first time in the history of hitting the speed bag, I have a theme.
If it's 80s and 90s hip-hop, I'm done.
Meaning all of the questions are the same type of question. And there's 15 of them, and they require quick answers. What I decided to do was I looked up the biggest feuds in the history of music. And all you have to do, Craig, is tell me who would win if they both fought.
All right.
Number one.
Will I know them all?
Yeah, you'll know everybody. They're all famous.
Okay. They're all Canadian?
Do you want to go from the least to the most? All right. First one. Prince versus Michael Jackson. Who wins? And give me like one sentence how.
Prince, Michael Jackson due to exhaustion.
Nicki Minaj and Miley Cyrus.
Nicki Minaj all day. Way bigger.
Taylor Swift and Katy Perry.
KP. Wacky.
Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey.
How will I know if Whitney would beat her? I go with Whitney.
She smoked crack too. Kanye West. Listen, I'm going to take a crackhead over a non-crackhead every day. Kanye West versus Jay-Z.
Jay-Z all day.
Nas versus Jay-Z.
Still Jay-Z.
Axl Rose versus Kurt Cobain.
Okay, are we talking 2020 Axl Rose that looks like he got stung by a bunch of bees, or are we talking like late 80s?
We're sure as shit not talking 2020 Kurt Cobain, so you might as well go in their primes.
Okay, in their primes. So we're taking a jacked up rock and roll icon, and we're taking like a guy that seemed to me like a pacifist. So I'm going to go with Axl Rose.
John Lennon against Paul McCartney.
Well, I mean, Paul McCartney died in a car accident in 1966, and John Lennon died in the 80s.
This guy who's posing is Paul McCartney.
Give me the year. Are we talking Wings Paul McCartney, or are we talking the Beatles?
So obviously so Lennon died in the early 80s. Let's go mid-70s.
Mid-70s? Imagine all the people tuning in for that fight. I wasn't alive then. I'll go Paul McCartney.
Yeah, I was going to let this one be, but there's my Paul McCartney.
Boy.
Chris Brown versus Drake.
See, I've been waiting my whole life for this one night where we could start from the bottom. Now we're here. Double your fun. Yeah. I mean, Chris Breezy with the dance moves. I'd take Chris Brown.
For some reason, I feel like Drake has hands. I don't know why. I just get that vibe. Kid Rock and Tommy Lee. Fought over Pamela Anderson.
Tommy Lee was hitting the sticks in the 90s and Pamela Anderson, whereas Kid Rock was, I don't know, hitting First Choice. That's a good Canadian reference to get his hair cut. I'm going to go with Detroit on that one. I'm going to go Kid Rock.
Let me just stop for 1 second. I think this is the best fight of the whole list.
It's most likely to happen.
Tommy Lee, if you ever read the Motley Crue book, The Dirt, or watch the kind of movie, Tommy Lee was a scrapper, and Kid Rock's from Detroit. I think this is the best fight on the whole card. This was a card.
Machine Gun Kelly's really grown on me, and I actually thought he was quite good in that movie, the 30 minutes I watched of it.
50 Cent and Ja Rule.
Oh, so we got the guy that's associated with Bellator and Firefest. I'm going to go with Bellator's own 50 Cent.
And last but certainly not least, Tupac and Biggie.
Speed advantage to Tupac, power to Biggie, endurance to Tupac. I'd have to see height and reach, but I'd probably say Tupac. That's a tough one.
I just can't see Tupac getting his ass whipped.
Yeah,
even by right? Biggie. There you have it. Hitting the speed bag this week. Of course, I did it with a theme because, that's the kind of shit I do. All right, Craig. Let's start the conversation. Shouts to MMA Reddit, as always. Start the conversation this week with a business case. If you're listening in the car or on a plane, one of you is allowed to fall asleep. We're going to spice this one up a bit because it seems like Sean O'Malley, Phoenix fighter, who we haven't seen in the cage in almost 2 years, keeps getting paid by any way possible outside of fighting. He's partnered with a new app set to rival Cameo called Talkie and charging $5 for an all-access look at his fight camp by way of a mini docuseries. For Sean O'Malley, it's Twitch, and Talkie for Beck Rawlings, it's been OnlyFans, and your biggest star in the sport has one of the most popular brands of whiskey to his name. Craig, if you were managing a young fighter and giving advice in order to set up a retirement plan, how would you guide them in order to capitalize on their short window in fighting?
It's funny, this app that I'd never heard of. So there's an article in MMA Fighting that brought this up, and I thought it was a good idea to talk about it. So I'm looking on this website that's really hard to find called Talkie.app. Then I'm looking at creators. You can book a session with, or you can book a video message with Rose Namajunas, Luciana Andrade, the ring card girl, Joanne Calderwood, Scott Holtzman. So to me, somebody from this Talkie app went, hey, I know somebody at the UFC. Let's bring in some of these fighters. And if you want to get a personalized message from Sean O'Malley, and it's a ripoff of Cameo. But if you go down, you can see all the old videos. And for Sean O'Malley, it costs, and I'm not joking, you can go on the website, $69 to have a video done by Sean O'Malley. But it costs $5 if you want to get this docuseries. And it's something that otherwise he would have put out on YouTube. We've seen different stuff with him and Anatomy of a Fighter on YouTube. I thought they did a great job on that one. But in terms of the overall question, okay, so Beck Rawlings, and we talked about it last week, she didn't need fighting. She can do OnlyFans. She can do sponsorships. She's making money outside of fighting. She doesn't need it. But, here's the big but, no pun intended, she was on a fight losing streak, and she won last week. So now her name's in the news for a whole different set of reasons. But for a guy like Sean O'Malley that hasn't fought in the last 2 years, how's he keeping his name in the game? He's still relevant, not because of the injury that he had against Andrei Sukumtov. It's because he's on Twitch. He's always on social media. He's always trying to make a buck. And you cannot slag a guy or a gal like that because, again, like I said earlier, you have such a short window. So if I was a manager of a young fighter, the first thing I would say is a presence on social media. You have to be on Twitter, on Instagram, maybe not the Facebook, but give fans an inside look. Then do these Talkie things, do the cameos, do whatever you can in your window to capitalize on it. Because there's going to be a day where you're 45 years old and you're stepping into the cage against Alberto Del Rio for Combate, and then your fight's overturned to a no contest. That day will come. sooner than you think. So you got to set yourself up financially so you're not fighting against Chuck Liddell for Oscar De La Hoya.
I think it would, and this is a little bit of a cop-out answer, but I think it would depend on what their skill set is, what they like to do. I mean, if you're a guy that's ripped up like Paulo Costa and looks like he does, I mean, you might as well just be an Instagram model on some level. You might as well just put your name out there and say, I'll wear whatever clothes you want. You see these girls out here that have 100, 150,000 followers, and it's like paid advertisements for whatever brand of clothing they want. I've been more surprised in lieu of the Reebok deal that more fighters haven't done that. I think what they should do, in my opinion, a guy like Dominic Cruz, is if they're going to do all these things publicly, like let's just say this for an example, right? You find a friend who's okay with a camera, right? And you just say, if I'm going to Santa Monica Pier with my family tonight, I'm going to wear something from somebody's clothing. I'm wearing it. And the pictures that I take at Santa Monica Pier are going to be in that branded clothing. And it'll be what I'm doing, but it'll also be like a paid advertisement. Or you could go the Shaq route. And I'm not saying that all these guys have Shaq's kind of money, but Shaq was always a guy who invested in a lot of companies that were already somewhat established. Like Shaq would buy, Magic Johnson bought.
Same as Magic Johnson, yeah. With
Magic Johnson bought movie theaters. Shaq bought into like Five Guys, and he's got 18. So like if you're a fighter and you got a little bit of extra money laying around, just buy into a Starbucks franchise, something that you already know is successful, or a Subway franchise. Buy something.
Or Tim Hortons.
Yeah, something that's got already some value, and just sort of invest the money in it. Don't open a nightclub or anything that you don't know is going to work. Even I think some of these apps are risky. I just think some of these things that the fighters are doing are not things they actually want to be doing. And at some point they're going to tire of doing it. For example, Drakkar Klose is doing a documentary for his fight. It's like close decision, but it's something like that.
Encounters of the Michigan kind?
No, it's close to a victory or something. Close path to a victory or something like that. But so I don't think that these guys really want to create content. And I think they have to figure out what to do with the one piece of currency that they have, which is their name. I think some of them think they're a little bit too cool for branded content or for paid advertisements, and they're really not. I think that they're like, oh, I don't want to, inundate my fans with whatever. But if you're like Michael Bisping and you train at the Ruka gym and you wear Ruka shirts left and right, that should be part of your platform. I mean, them paying you is one thing, but you going out and looking for sponsorship, anybody that's looking to launch a clothing line, if I was a fighter, I'd be looking for those kind of guys.
There's two pieces of advice that I would have too. And not that you have to take this with a grain of salt. I'll give you my two sources really. One of them's a very prominent boxer out of this region. He's fought on DAZN cards before. He's held belts before. Another one is an MMA manager. There's two things that they told me in growing my brand, but also for up-and-coming fighters that they look for. And if they see a fighter that does this well, there's a good chance that they're going to want to sign them. They're going to want to try to bring them brand deals. Here's the first piece of advice. If you're a young fighter, you're an amateur fighter, you've only got 2 or 3 fights, and hey, your record might be salty. You could be 1-2 to start off your young career. A, it doesn't matter that much. Just keep fighting, unless you can. But B, the thing that a manager really looks for is not just that social media presence, but you brought it up. Maybe you have a sponsorship banner, and maybe it's, Joe's Tire Shop and Tim's Coffee Shop, but at least you had the initiative to go in and talk to Joe and Tim to try and get their money. And so if a manager sees that you have a pair of shorts that has a bunch of sponsors, or you have a banner that has a bunch of sponsors, and it doesn't matter how small they are, at least you had that initiative to go out there and talk to them, and that really reflects well on you. And that's what both of those guys really imparted on me. And if I had any wisdom that I could share with a young fighter, it's social media presence and go out there and try and market yourself. No matter how small you think you are, it's the same thing in a game like this. But in terms of an actual fighter and you want to see your stock rise, and again, that's a good term to use here, that's the way to do it. Personally, that's how I see a good start.
I think also you need to be aware of how Hollywood markets people. And it's it's interesting how no matter
do you though? Because I don't have a Hollywood face.
Well,
or voice.
No, but I think some of these fighters, it's like what Hollywood does very well is they always have, and granted, there's a lot of Hollywood actresses and actors, But it's like anytime something relevant happens, they're there. Someone's there. So here's my point. If you're a fighter, right, you need to figure out, how do I go where things are happening and also speak with the PR department of that event and make sure that when they're talking about who's in the house, they're saying that you're in the house, right? Now, if you're some prelim fighter for the UFC, chances are if you go to the US Open in New York to watch a tennis match, they're not going to call you out. But if you befriend, or if you say, hey, I'm going to this match, reach out to the UFC or whatever your promotion is, I really like to meet Rafael Nadal. Now you've sort of, you're clout chasing, but now there's a reason for them to say what, like you say, I'd like to meet Rafael Nadal. He spends 20 minutes in the gym with you. There's a camera rolling. Now they have some content they could put on the US Open. You're a part of it. That, I think, is how you do it. If you're a good-looking guy, date some actress, date some musician.
That's where I was thinking you were going with this. If all else fails and you can't market yourself and social media doesn't work for you, screw your way to the top. I mean, it's worked for years.
Yeah, or at least take these people out in high-vis situations. Like, listen, Ariana Grande and Pete Davidson dated for a minute, but Pete Davidson was nowhere near as popular at the beginning of their relationship as he was at the end. So he used that. Listen, J-Lo was dating Ben Affleck. I mean, all these high-power couples. And if you're going to do it, make sure you get with a girl where they can combine your names into something that's catchy. That's important as well. So, if you want to be a power couple, you have to have a name that can easily be transitioned into a compounded nickname. All right, Craig. I mean, we did it.
Wow.
Another great one in the books. You have anything left to say?
Not really. I'm just waiting for my teed up portion where I get to say something witty. But yeah, apart from that, I'm looking forward to another busy week in the sport. We've got this question wasn't asked. I wasn't on Between Links or Off the Cuff this week. Again, you said you were contractually obligated for 2 podcasts a week with the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. I'm only obligated for 1, and this is the one. So I'm glad I could be here. But if I could give this weekend's card a letter grade, and it's going to be harsh, I give it a D. It's not good. I spent so much time trying to get excited for some of these fights and researching some of these fighters that are making their UFC debuts. But when you have a division that doesn't have a ranking system, you bring somebody in who hasn't fought in 2 years just because they're 4-0 and they have a pulse. I can't get excited for it. See, I had to really think about it that hard. It's a rough one. It's a rough one.
3 quick ones on the way out of here just because we got a little bit of time.
That's fair.
Adesanya and the Twin Towers comment. Do you think that he's successfully handled it and it is in his rear view, or will it resurface?
I don't think it'll resurface, especially in the fight against Yoel Romero.
Tito Ortiz and Alberto Del Rio ruled a no contest. Is there any other way for that fight to have ended?
Why was it a no contest? Can you fill me in? Because I tried to read between the lines and I read a lot of different articles, and I don't know why. They wouldn't really say.
Details are murky.
Yes.
The early stoppage staff has calls out to all the relevant parties. We'll see if they hit us back.
All right, so let's look at the last 2 fights that Tito Ortiz had before that. He beat such notable names and legends as Chuck Liddell and the Chael Sonnen.
Easy.
So there weren't no content. Listen, I'm a conspiracy theorist about the fight with Chael Sonnen, and I'll keep that to myself. But
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm not totally surprised it was a no contest. Continue.
Last thing, Eddie Bravo went on Joe Rogan's podcast and was talking about Tony Ferguson, and he said in a clip I watched that they like to look at not what can we show Khabib that he's never seen before. Do you think that's what makes Tony unique? That he can bring techniques to Khabib that he's never seen before, as opposed to the fact that he can deal with Khabib's techniques? Because he can't. I mean, he has the pedigree to somewhat handle Khabib's wrestling. I don't want to say completely, but we can at least say as well as anybody else has. So then, is the secret to this fight, which is Eddie Bravo's theory, which is that we can show Khabib some looks that he's never seen before?
His defensive grappling techniques mixed with his wonky striking are certainly unique takes, like unique looks. I mean, who's had weirder striking that Khabib's fought? There's one name, like Edson Barboza is the only guy I can think of that has like wild striking. And he didn't really have the same type of wrestling or defensive grappling that Tony has. Habib manhandled Edson Barboza. So then you look at the grappling and the wrestling. Who's the best grappler wrestler that Habib's fought all the way up? Who can you think of? Dustin Poirier, probably.
Did he fight Kevin Lee? He fought Kevin Lee, right?
No.
I feel like he did. All right.
No.
Then no. I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, so I think it's the best test, and again, that's why the fight's been booked 5 times. I'm not telling you something you didn't know. But as far as different looks, I mean, just go back and look at all of the marijuana magazines from the mid to late 2000s of Eddie Bravo with his long hair and his black shirts and his long black jeans. This is a guy that brings a different look every time, and if he can impart some wisdom on that, on a fighter that typically lifts weights on, what are they called? What are those balls called? They're not bocce balls, but what are they called? The little half ball that you jump on.
I know this one. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird answer for a weird guy. So, yeah, they can certainly give him different looks.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were going to build a guy to fight Khabib, it'd be Tony Ferguson. So, I mean, that's why everybody's excited about the fight. That's why we're going to do all angles. That's why it's, probably the most relevant fight at 155 pounds, even if you count Conor in the last, how many years. All right, guys, there you have it. The 18th episode of Early Stoppage is in the books. Be sure and comment and subscribe. Like us on YouTube. Be sure to listen to all the other content Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, including the Not Safe for Work podcast with Kyle Steele and Fred Kirby. Between the Links, hosted by Mike Heck, and starring an all-star cast of writers from around MMA, including Craig Allen, including Keith Schillen, including Davidson Baker. The Loudmouth MMA Recap Show with John Franklin and Keith Schillen. The Breakdown Show with Max and Marcel. MMA Yesterday with Kyle Steele and Keith Schillen. I love that I still say that one. The Kyle Steele Show, the MMA Takeover, the Off the Cuff. What else was I going to say? Hey, haven't they changed the music on the MMA Takeover?
They have. It's worldly. People like it now.
All right, Craig can be followed at Craig Allen FMP. I can be followed at SM Cornerman. The fight has been stopped. We'll see you next week. Craig, say something witty.
John Franklin always stifles my music choice at the start of this show, and if you made it this far, here's your chance to get into a classic song called YOLO by The Lonely Island. Take no chances, stop freelance, and invest in your future. Don't dilute your finances. 401k, make sure it's low risk. Then get some real estate, 4.2%, 30-year mortgage, that's important. That's a great deal. If you can't afford it, don't forge it on your last bill. Renting is for suckers right now. A dependable savings, and you'll retire with money in your account. Beast by Kendrick Lamar. There's your advice, fighters.
And that's the first time we started with hip-hop lyrics and ended with hip-hop lyrics. Peace!